My father is Ismael Zambada Garcia. El Mayo is his most commonly used nickname. My father is the leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. Because of power, money, and corruption, there is unfortunately jealousy from others, people who envy you, and problems begin to arise. That's how wars start.
One of these wars will break out between the Sinaloa and Tijuana cartels, costing thousands of lives over several decades, even though just a few years earlier, their leaders were still sitting at the same table. 1992, the confrontation becomes inevitable. The Arellano Felix family, firmly established in Tijuana, quickly consolidates its control over the strategic corridors leading to California. It gradually brings the entire city under its influence to monopolize what is known as a plaza.
Plazas are areas or territories through which drugs are trafficked into the United States. And there, the authorities and police serve the boss in charge.
Anyone who transports drugs through their territory without authorization risks ending up in a body bag. To maintain control of this extremely lucrative area, the Arellano Felix brothers invest heavily in corruption, up to $1 million per week, to buy protection from government and police authorities at every level. Surprisingly, El Chapo, one of the main leaders of Sinaloa, openly defies the Arellano Felix brothers. He rejects their tax, which he considers unfair, and actively seeks ways to bypass their control.
Ruthless, El Chapo entered Tijuana without permission from the plaza's owners to move drugs into California, and that's how his war with the Arellano Felix cartel began.
Despite his tactical intelligence, El Chapo could never have faced an organization as powerful as the Tijuana cartel alone, even with the help of his ally, Hector Palma. In this deadlock, an unexpected ally emerged for El Chapo. From the shadows of the Mexican underworld, Ismael Zambada Garcia, nicknamed El Mayo, made the crucial decision to support him. The story takes a fascinating turn here, because El Mayo had previously maintained close relationships with the Arellano brothers. For years, he had lived in Tijuana and worked closely with them. Their ties went beyond mere business. The eldest Arellano brother was even the godfather to some of Mayo's children, a testament to a deeply personal relationship. Yet, despite these sacred bonds, the Arellanos, blinded by their arrogance, also demanded that El Mayo pay them a tax. Although he could have negotiated an arrangement, his sharp instincts made him recognize the danger posed by these ambitious brothers. Their desire to expand their influence beyond Tijuana represented a threat that had to be neutralized before it spiraled out of control. Sinaloa, the birthplace of Mexican organized crime, sees the rise of one of the most notorious kingpins, Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia. Born in a small village of 200 people in the Culiacan region, he is sent to the main city for his primary education, as his parents want to give him a better future. El Mayo's childhood, though marked by a warm family atmosphere, takes a tragic turn at age 12 with the death of his father. Forced to leave secondary school, he must help support his family. In the Golden Triangle, a mountainous region where opium poppies, the source of heroin, have been cultivated for generations, his uncle and other family members were already involved in these activities. But when he returned to the village, Mayo still limited himself to legal farm work to make ends meet. After doing various odd jobs, he settled in El Dorado, a booming town thanks to the sugar industry. He starts as a simple tire washer for trucks transporting sugar and later becomes a driver. Yet these modest earnings are not enough, and that's when his life takes a radical turn. In the early 1970s, a Cuban named Antonio Cruz Vasquez, a seasoned criminal who has spent time in the United States, arrives in Sinaloa looking for suppliers. Their relationship quickly goes beyond business. Antonio marries Mayo's older sister, forging an unbreakable family and criminal bond. From then on, the Zambada family becomes heroin suppliers for Vasquez's network, while the young Mayo, barely 20, begins carrying out missions for his brother-in-law, whom he sees as a mentor. After establishing the strategic partnership, Vasquez returns to Los Angeles to continue his operations. In Sinaloa, the drugs are meticulously packaged and shipped in suitcases via various flights or hidden in truck tires en route to the United States. They are then distributed in Los Angeles and Las Vegas through Vasquez's highly organized network. This is how El Mayo, barely 20, enters large-scale trafficking. His success is such that in 1977, Mayo decides to take the next step and move to Los Angeles. He brings with him his first wife, Rosario, his teenage sweetheart from Sinaloa, whom he considers his gem despite the many companions who will follow. With her, he has Vicente, nicknamed Vicentillo, his favorite son, destined to one day inherit his father's empire. Vicentillo is just one among the long list of children El Mayo has. He certainly doesn't slow down in that department. El Mayo settles in Los Angeles with his family. But barely a year later, things become complicated for Vasquez, who makes no secret of his flashy lifestyle, squandering fortunes in casinos. He is eventually arrested by the police, compromising part of their network. That's when the Zambada name appears in newspapers. Articles reveal that the drugs come from the Vasquez-Zambada family business. This unwanted publicity highlights their significant position in the underworld. El Mayo benefited from exceptional luck. American authorities considered him a minor player and never pursued charges against him during this period. This negligence probably stems from their mistaken belief that he resided in Mexico, when in reality, he operated in Los Angeles for the next 5 consecutive years, taking over and developing the network established by his brother-in-law. For the cartels, Los Angeles was then a nerve center almost as important as Sinaloa. It was the logistical hub from which distribution to major American cities departed, the true source of the drug trade's astronomical profits. As a methodical strategist, El Mayo systematically repatriated his earnings to his native state. In Sinaloa, he invested heavily in real estate, livestock, and agriculture, building the foundations of a financial empire with perfectly legal appearances. All his close associates testify to his discreet lifestyle. Without ostentation or eccentricity, he cultivated anonymity and dressed like an authentic ranchero, disdaining luxury brands. To his family, he confided that he wasn't building his fortune to live in palaces, but to never experience poverty again. This calculated sobriety explains how he was able to evade authorities for more than half a century, becoming an almost mythical figure in the underworld. Back in Los Angeles, El Mayo navigated between both sides of the border to supervise his distribution network. A visionary strategist, he made the crucial decision to establish himself in Tijuana in 1982, while maintaining residences in several strategic locations. He clearly perceived the market shifts. The white powder era was taking hold, bringing exponential profits, but demanding more sophisticated logistics, and above all, the construction of lasting alliances. During this period, Mexico experienced a decisive transformation. At this time, the Guadalajara cartel reached its peak. Although its name evokes its operational base, the majority of its members originated from Sinaloa. The organization built a reputation as a pioneer in collaboration with Colombians, transforming Mexico into a strategic transit platform to the United States. The Pacific route, connecting Sinaloa to California via Tijuana, became a privileged corridor for transporting Colombian powder, generating immense profits for Mexican kingpins. The Guadalajara cartel functioned as a federation grouping various regional kingpins. Despite occasional tensions, their alliance endured, mainly under the influence of Miguel Felix Gallardo, co-founder and dominant figure nicknamed the Godfather. In this milieu where everyone knew each other, each sought to profit from the flourishing trade. Their mission broke down into 2 essential steps: receiving Colombian merchandise on Mexican soil, then transporting it to the American border, where the Colombians took over distribution and sales. El Mayo, who already possessed a transportation infrastructure for heroin, naturally integrated into this system. While preserving the independence of his group, he collaborated closely with Miguel's organization. It is in this same structure that future heavyweights of the drug trade, such as El Chapo and Hector Palma, begin to gravitate. As is often the case, business flourishes without a hitch until the Guadalajara group commits the irreparable act of liquidating Kiki Camarena, a DEA agent. This event triggers an international scandal and provokes the fury of the United States, which launches a vast operation of reprisals. Miguel's main associates fall one after another, while the Godfather himself, thanks to his network of political influences, manages to maintain his freedom for a few more years. It is in this context of chaos that El Mayo's name begins to emerge in official reports. According to documents from the 1980s, El Mayo collaborates closely with Miguel.
Under Miguel's orders, El Mayo directs a drug trafficking organization based in Culiacan, with influence along the Pacific coast, maintaining connections with the so-called Medellin Cartel.
Not surprisingly, after the execution of the DEA agent, Mexican media begin to take a close interest in the links between Miguel and Mayo Zambada. This media exposure also has repercussions for El Mayo's younger brother, known by the pseudonym El Rey. Unlike his older brother, Rey aspires to a normal life, but in Culiacan, Sinaloa, it's difficult to escape the shadow of a brother already feared in the underworld. Despite this burden, he tries to forge his own path by pursuing accounting studies. Brilliant, he quickly climbs the ladder and lands, barely in his 20s, a management position in a respectable company in Mexico City. Everything changes when the DEA agent case brings the name Zambada back into the press. His colleagues, intrigued, question him about a possible family connection, and forced to admit the truth, Rey sees the company's trust erode despite his undeniable accounting skills. The bad publicity associated with his name eventually costs him his position. Faced with this professional impasse, his brother El Mayo extends a hand, proposing that he examine the accounts of his organization. Suspecting certain American associates of embezzling funds, he entrusts him with a meticulous examination of his accounts. Rey puts his accounting talent to good use, developing a clear system to track the money and easily identify those responsible for the thefts, and gradually, his responsibilities extend to complete management of the network's logistics. According to El Rey's later testimonies, his brother's infrastructure transports such large quantities of coke that Miguel solicits him to save his empire. Miguel is threatened following the arrest of his main associates after the DEA agent Kiki Camarena affair. Thanks to his logistics network, El Mayo ensures the passage of shipments to the United States and, above all, takes advantage of it to establish his own direct relationships with the Colombian cartels. In the meantime, with the declining Guadalajara structure, another group is gaining power, the Arellano Felix brothers, who are gradually consolidating their control over Tijuana, now considered a key strategic position for all cross-border smuggling. $230 million in annual profits. That's what the Arellano Felix brothers reportedly earn through their taxation system imposed on all traffickers crossing through Tijuana into the United States. Operating like a genuine parallel customs agency, they controlled one of the most lucrative corridors along the US-Mexican border. However, before this meteoric rise, they were merely modest operators in the hierarchy. Let's take a step back. In this large family, Benjamin occupied the leadership role, assisted by his brother Ramon, who was more violent and unpredictable. Unlike other major figures from Sinaloa, the Arellano Felix family didn't grow up in poverty. Their first steps into crime focused on smuggling electronic devices and clothing, still marginal activities until they settled in Guadalajara. It was there that Benjamin crossed paths with Javier Caro Payan, nicknamed El Doctor, cousin of Rafael Caro Quintero, one of the co-founders of the Guadalajara cartel. In this milieu, the integration of close contacts and family members was common practice. It turns out that El Doctor was then responsible for operations in Tijuana for the cartel. Indeed, as previously explained, the Guadalajara organization was composed of different regional leaders who all operated in strategic zones to supervise logistics. It's important to understand that numerous bosses coexisted in a single region, sometimes collaborating, sometimes confronting each other. Not all were part of the Guadalajara organization, but violence wasn't as widespread at that time as it is today. In any case, the meeting between Benjamin and El Doctor bore fruit, and Benjamin was absorbed into the structure as a secretary and then lieutenant overseeing daily operations. He settled in Tijuana where his brother Ramon, the most violent of all, also joined him along with the rest of the family. Let's examine in detail the financial beginnings of the Arellano brothers in the 1980s. In 1984, Everardo Arturo Paez, nicknamed El Kitty, operated as a mid-level weed dealer in the United States. He coordinated 4 to 5 deliveries each week of about 100 kilograms each, moving the merchandise from San Diego to Los Angeles, a true hub of American distribution. His efficiency draws attention, and he's summoned to Tijuana to meet with his superiors. In this compartmentalized milieu where anonymity was paramount, operatives generally remained unaware of the identity of their true commanders. In early 1985 in Tijuana, El Kitty met 2 young men with a distinguished appearance, Benjamin and Ramon Arellano Felix, still simple lieutenants of El Doctor at that time. Having gained their trust, he was entrusted with the responsibility of repatriating approximately $2 million in monthly profits from weed sales from the United States to the Tijuana headquarters, a notable performance for these criminals who were still far from being considered real kingpins. During this period, the Tijuana organization succeeded in corrupting an American customs agent who facilitated the clandestine passage of shipments across the border. Following intelligence reports, authorities began to monitor this corrupt official. The Tijuana gang then implemented an ingenious system. A lookout posted on a hill with binoculars signaled to the drivers transporting products which checkpoint was manned by their accomplice, allowing them to head toward the secure passage. The inspector turned a blind eye to approximately 70 shipments, pocketing over $1 million in bribes along the way. American investigators would later identify him as an essential link in a much bigger operation that enabled the transport of more than 100 tons of weed under the direction of El Doctor. In 1987, the operation collapsed. The inspector was sentenced to 17 years in prison, and a large part of the network, which extended as far as Canada, was dismantled, including the arrest of El Doctor himself. Following this power vacuum, the Arellano Felix brothers naturally take control of operations, drawing on the expertise accumulated over their years in the business. Although they gain autonomy, they continue to operate under the umbrella of the Guadalajara Cartel, maintaining a privileged relationship with Miguel. As for El Kitty, he establishes himself as a trusted lieutenant alongside the brothers, developing a particularly strong friendship with Ramon. It's important to understand that a large city like Tijuana was not an exclusive territory. The colossal profits generated by its strategic position toward the United States inevitably attracted multiple crime bosses. Among these local figures, 2 men already dominated behind the scenes, Jesus Labra Aviles, nicknamed El Chuy, and Manuel Aguirre Galindo. These veterans, true financial masterminds, had a solid network in economic and political circles. According to the Office of the Attorney General of the Republic, El Chuy, presented as the uncle of the Arellano brothers, not only facilitated their expansion, but also ensured their integration by welcoming them upon their arrival in Tijuana a few years earlier. These strategists preferred to remain in the shadows, leaving the Arellano brothers to manage daily operations and especially control of the border corridors. This strategic alliance developed into a lasting and lucrative partnership, evolving into the creation of a true Council of Chiefs. This decision-making structure, composed of various influential members, met to rule on crucial matters: the opening of new routes, the diversification of activities, and, on a darker note, the elimination of rivals deemed too dangerous. It is important to recall that during this same period, El Mayo, who already supervised a vast network of operations in several regions, makes the strategic decision to move his family into the heart of Tijuana. This border city becomes the stage for a significant alliance with Benjamin, developing a professional collaboration so close that their respective families maintain privileged personal ties. Vicentillo, El Mayo's son, testifies to this in his writings.
At the time, most of them were associates and comrades of my father. I saw them very often when I lived there in the 80s. Javier Arellano Felix, Francisco Arellano Felix, Ramon Arellano Felix, Eduardo Arellano Felix. These were the ones I had the most contact with.
El Mayo's organization operates with formidable efficiency. His network has a sophisticated infrastructure to receive and transport shipments from Sinaloa along the Pacific coast to Tijuana. In this strategic border city, the Arellano brothers excel in the art of smuggling, a skill that distinguishes them from all other operators. The system operates with precision. Mayo's men deliver coke to warehouses in Tijuana. Then the Arellano operators take over for packaging and shipping to Los Angeles, where El Mayo's representatives retrieve the merchandise. This service costs Mayo between $1,000 and $1,200 per kilogram, an astronomical sum when you consider that tons of product regularly cross the border through this circuit. Over time, the Arellano brothers consolidate their position and gain influence. This rise allows them to develop their own network for importing and distributing white powder, aiming for increased autonomy. At the same time, they continue to offer their services to other members of the Guadalajara organization for cross-border transit, taking a substantial commission thanks to their privileged geographical position. It is essential to understand that all operators of the Guadalajara organization, notably the Arellano brothers, Hector Palma, and El Chapo, collaborate strategically to move their products to the United States. Above them are several influential associates, including Amado Carrillo Fuentes, who coordinate some of these operators while allowing them relative autonomy with their own networks and territories. The privileged relationship between Amado and El Mayo deserves to be highlighted, characterized by a solid friendship and constant mutual support. Regarding the dynamics between these figures, El Chapo has maintained tense relations with the Tijuana brothers since the beginning of his career. These antagonisms, initially minor, take a decisive turn in the late 80s, between 1988 and 1989 according to sources, marking the beginning of a major conflict. Armando Lopez, nicknamed El Rayo from Sinaloa, also operates for the Guadalajara group. A longtime associate of El Mayo, he maintains above all a brotherly relationship with El Chapo. Together, they mainly manage the reception of shipments arriving from Colombia by air. The critical incident occurs during a party in Tijuana. Testimonies differ on the occasion. Some mention El Mayo's birthday, others the baptism of Benjamin's daughter. El Rayo, drunk, provokes an altercation after being denied entry. The situation is complicated by pre-existing tensions. El Rayo apparently has feelings for Enedina, the Arellanos' sister, and his repeated advances exasperate the brothers, who intend her for a man of higher social status. At the party, alerted by the dispute, Ramon, the most violent of the brothers, comes out and, recognizing El Rayo, executes him with a bullet to the head without warning. The body is abandoned on an isolated road, and according to some sources, Ramon's men also eliminate members of El Rayo's family to prevent any vendetta. Although El Rayo was an old associate, that night, El Mayo does not break with the Arellanos. However, the incident opens a conflictual front with El Chapo, requiring numerous meetings to try to ease tensions.
In 1988, Ramon Arellano Felix executed a close friend of my compadre Chapo during my father's birthday party. His name was Armando Lopez, nicknamed El Rayo Lopez. After the liquidation, several meetings took place in Mexico City. I wasn't present, but my father and Amado Carrillo Fuentes were there. They went to Mexico City for the meeting. My father, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, my compadre Chapo, Hector Salazar Palma, nicknamed El Güero Palma, and the Arellanos to discuss what happened. At that time, they had sought to make peace. Everything was good between the Arellanos and my compadre Chapo, who lived in Guadalajara a few months a year during that period. They said that everything was in order with Ramon Arellano.
Despite this apparent truce, the peace remains fragile and short-lived. El Chapo, deeply marked by this affront, silently nurtures his resentment, patiently waiting for the ideal moment to exact his revenge. (1989) marks a decisive turning point in the underworld. Miguel, the all-powerful godfather, is finally arrested in his Guadalajara villa despite his vast network of political influence. This capture signals the inevitable beginning of the disintegration of the Guadalajara cartel. Shortly after, Amado, an exceptionally competent lieutenant and favored to succeed as head of the organization, falls in turn. The authorities dismantle his airline company, seize 6 planes, 2 properties, and a significant arsenal. The investigation officially confirms his links with Colombian cartels and air transport. Incarcerated at Reclusorio Sur, he shares his cell with Miguel and Juan José Esparragoza Moreno, nicknamed El Azul. The latter is considered a mediator in the Mexican underworld, recognized for his negotiation skills and ability to maintain good relationships with everyone. Thanks to his intelligence, he obtains what he wants without taking too many risks. Against all expectations, Amado's prison stay proves surprisingly brief. To general amazement, he's released after only a few months of incarceration due to insufficient evidence. Without a clear hierarchy, and with each member of the Guadalajara organization gaining power independently, the system and rules that govern drug trade during the previous decade can no longer function. It's necessary to grant more autonomy to each person to maintain order and preserve peace. This is the fundamental idea that, in reality, could never have been viable in the long term. It's in this context that a historic meeting is held in Acapulco, a highly popular beach resort at the time. During this meeting, the former territories of the Guadalajara cartel are divided. Each lieutenant receives exclusive control of a specific area called a plaza. This new system imposes a clear rule. Anyone wishing to move their merchandise through another's plaza must pay a tax to the controller of that territory. Following the distribution of territory, several strategic areas are assigned to the main characters of our story. Tijuana goes to Jesus, known as El Chuy, who, preferring to remain in the shadows, entrusts operational management to the Arellano brothers. Tecate, a border position adjacent to Tijuana, goes to El Chapo. San Luis Rio Colorado is placed under the authority of Hector Palma. Juarez, a corridor of comparable importance to Tijuana, passes under the control of Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, in close collaboration with Amado. Finally, Sinaloa, the historic cradle of many narcos, is attributed to El Mayo, associated with Baltasar Diaz, known under the alias Don Balta. For years, El Mayo had maintained a close collaboration with Baltasar Diaz, known as Don Balta, overseeing their joint operations. At this time, Don Balta was already considered one of the most influential barons in the country, having accumulated a colossal fortune estimated at $500 million. Mexican authorities attributed to him not only the role of principal financier, but also that of strategic advisor within Miguel's organization. Following Miguel's incarceration, he had lost a large part of his financial capabilities, a void that Don Balta managed to fill by financing the significant shipments that continued to flow from Colombia. The alliance between El Mayo and Don Balta manifested in a particularly significant way during the marriage of Maria Teresa, El Mayo's daughter, to Javier, Don Balta's son. This family union sealed their professional partnership. El Mayo is even said to have asked Benjamin Arellano Felix to be the godfather of the ceremony, testifying to the importance of their relationships. Unfortunately for Don Balta, his influence was cut short in 1991 when he was arrested by the authorities. He would spend several years in detention, but his criminal legacy endured through his son Javier, who continued to work closely with El Mayo despite his father's incarceration. Even after the division of territories, Mayo strategically maintained his residence in Tijuana while strengthening his ties with the Arellano brothers. The latter, who had become the undisputed masters of this border plaza, were essential allies for his operations. Initially, El Mayo relied entirely on the Arellanos' logistics to transport his merchandise to the United States, paying a commission in return. Over time, he built his own transportation infrastructure in the Tijuana corridor, reducing his dependence while maintaining occasional collaborations with the brothers. His considerable investments in this region clearly demonstrated the strategic importance he placed on this border crossing point. Tijuana truly became his base of operations. Not content with settling his legitimate wife and children there, including Vicentillo, he also brought his mistress Leticia. From this relationship, a son named Serafin was born in May 1990 in San Diego. To strengthen his ties with the Arellanos, El Mayo did not hesitate to ask Benjamin to become the godfather of this newborn. This godfather relationship had a purely pragmatic dimension. At this time, each shipment crossing Tijuana was subject to a tax, and El Mayo hoped, through his family alliance, to obtain more advantageous conditions. However, as we will soon see, events did not unfold according to his expectations. The Tijuana family established itself as a fearsome force in the underworld thanks to a strategy as brilliant as it was terrifying. Where their competitors recruited from the underworld, the Arellano brothers broke with the norm by transforming the social elite into a veritable war machine. In the hills of Tijuana, luxurious villas became the stage for recruitment as subtle as it was effective. At nightfall, the sons of the Mexican bourgeoisie flocked to these residences, where music pulsed and champagne flowed freely. Behind these festive facades lay a web patiently woven by El Chuy, the brothers' shadowy advisor. He was the one who suggested to the brothers that they specifically target these privileged heirs. The strategy was relentless: immerse these young men in an ocean of white powder and forbidden pleasures, creating a dependency that transformed them into devoted servants of the organization. These privileged young people, called narco juniors, start out as ideal mules. Who would suspect these elegant students driving luxury cars of transporting several kilos of white powder between Tijuana and San Diego? The Arellanos quickly discovered that their strategy exceeded expectations. Behind the polished appearance of these children from good families was an insatiable thirst for thrills. These rich kids weren't afraid of anything. They had grown up with everything money could buy. The only thing they had never experienced was the adrenaline of holding a life in their hands. They saw Ramon as a mythical figure to imitate. His explosive character, unpredictability, and limitless violence embodied for them the ideal of the all-powerful narco. For these young people, crime wasn't a question of economic survival, but an extreme form of entertainment, leading them to increasingly aberrant behaviors, from spectacular overdoses to gratuitous executions to kill boredom. They exploited Tijuana's unique geography to create an almost perfect system of impunity. The scenario was surgical in its precision. After an execution in Mexican territory, the young killers headed to the border crossing in their luxury cars. American passports in hand, confident smiles on their lips, they crossed into San Diego. In a matter of minutes, they were beyond the reach of Mexican justice, and their reputation attracted more and more recruits thirsty for easy money and thrills. Remember El Kitty? Unlike traditional narcos, you wouldn't see alligator skin boots or solid gold chains on him. With his well-pressed shirt, El Kitty looked more like an accountant than a warlord. You could have passed him in an upscale restaurant without ever suspecting that this man had ordered numerous executions. Thanks to his excellent work in transport and distribution, El Kitty developed a strong friendship with Ramon, to the point of becoming an essential lieutenant among the narco juniors. This cell wasn't just a simple execution force, it also sat on the Council of Chiefs of the Tijuana group. It functioned as the organization's true armed wing, receiving its instructions directly to carry out missions. Within this council of chiefs, they discussed what was happening and especially noted those who weren't paying their tax correctly. The brothers knew that El Mayo was using routes to move his merchandise through the Tijuana corridor without paying what was required. They kept precise accounts and saw the debt accumulating, but still preferred to be patient to preserve their long-standing relationship. Ramon wanted to eliminate El Mayo without further delay, but Benjamin opposed it, arguing that such action could cause a definitive break with their other Sinaloa allies. According to a later statement by Benjamin, he considered Mayo a harmless little kitten. However, he couldn't say the same about another man who was stomping on him like a real headache: El Chapo. After the meeting in Acapulco to distribute territories and operate in peace, some were not really satisfied with their allocation, which they considered unfair. El Chapo had been assigned Tecate, which compared to Tijuana looked more like a village. The men of Tijuana had inherited a veritable gold mine with a considerable competitive advantage thanks to established routes to Los Angeles, while Tecate mainly overlooked a desert. Moreover, according to the new rules, El Chapo could no longer use the Tijuana corridor without paying a tax, even though he had already set up his own logistics structures there for some time. His group was also in the process of building a new tunnel under this border, with plans and construction already well underway. Let's not forget that El Chapo harbored a deep hatred toward the Arellano brothers since their liquidation of his friend El Rayo at a party in Tijuana. El Chapo also held Miguel responsible for granting impunity to the Arellano brothers after this elimination. The latter were clearly Miguel's favorites and enjoyed considerable privileges in the restructuring of the group. As long as Miguel directed the Guadalajara organization, a certain order prevailed and conflicts were quickly appeased. But with the boss imprisoned, no one could control El Chapo anymore. Moreover, he was not acting alone. He collaborated closely with his partner Hector Palma, who had also been assigned a plaza located further east. In other words, the duo is already in competition with the Tijuana group for control of drug trade to the United States on this northwest coast. The rise to notoriety of former low-level operators like El Chapo and Hector cannot be ignored. The Arellano brothers managed to infiltrate a Venezuelan, Rafael Clavo Moreno, to strike at their rivals. The plan is as simple as it is perverse. First, Rafael approaches Hector's sister to gain her trust, and especially that of the organization. Then he executes the other part of the plan, which requires more time. He seduces Guadalupe, Hector's wife, makes her fall in love, and manipulates her until convincing her to flee with him to the United States, taking with her the two young children she had with Hector, aged 4 and 5 respectively. Like a secret-loving couple, they then go to San Francisco, where the woman withdraws several $1 million from a bank account belonging to her husband. But what should be a new life turns into a nightmare. A few weeks after their disappearance, Hector receives an icy package, a box containing his wife's decapitated head. The horror is just beginning. A few days later, a second package arrives, a video showing his two children thrown from a bridge in Venezuela, filmed during their fatal fall. Rafael filmed this unspeakable act, breaking not only the cartel's code of honor that protected families, but also the last fragment of Hector's humanity, who would never be the same again. Rafael is arrested shortly afterwards in Venezuela, where he will meet a brutal liquidation in prison. Eye for an eye, all his children will also be liquidated. In memory of his family, Hector will build a mausoleum in the cemetery of Culiacan, the cost of which will amount to about $500,000. Although the infiltration is generally attributed to the Arellano brothers, the order would have allegedly been given by the godfather Miguel to get revenge on Hector. The latter had begun to conduct independent operations, diverting Miguel's clients. This autonomous ascension was not tolerated. He had to be taught respect for the hierarchy. El Chapo's alleged right-hand man at the time, El Gordo, also confirms this version, testifying that the conflict with the Arellanos would have erupted after the execution of Hector's family, directly ordered by Miguel. Whatever the case, as we will see later, whether it's the Tijuana brothers or Miguel himself, they all end up on their blacklist. First, the liquidation of El Chapo's friend, then that of Hector's family. The hatred intensified gradually. It is finally in 1991 that the new system of established plazas began to collapse. Once the territories were allocated, no one respected this system and each began to operate in the zones of others. According to the testimony of El Mayo's brother, it was during this year that El Chapo violated the territorial agreements by passing cargoes through Tijuana without the authorization of the Arellano brothers, thus triggering the conflict. Outside of Tijuana, Mayo's power is essentially limited to his stronghold in Sinaloa. Geography imposes an unavoidable reality. To move his merchandise northward, he must forge strategic alliances with those who control the border crossing points. This constraint, combined with his categorical refusal to pay the passage tax imposed by the Arellanos, naturally draws him closer to Chapo and Hector, who also work with Amado while maintaining their autonomy. As for the Arellano brothers, El Mayo navigates troubled waters. He needs to maintain cordial relations with them, having invested considerably in infrastructure on their territory. Abandoning these investments would have been a total loss, but the pressure keeps building. Unlike the open warfare already pitting the Arellanos against El Chapo, Mayo still attempts to preserve a fragile balance. The summer of 1991 marks a turning point. The streets of Tijuana and Culiacan transform into open-air cemeteries, and drug seizures multiply, attracting media and police attention that's harmful for business. The situation becomes untenable, making dialogue between rival factions essential. The Arellano brothers, aware of the ties binding El Chapo and El Mayo, make a diplomatic gesture. Benjamin asks Mayo to organize a meeting of the three, hoping to find common ground with El Chapo. The meeting is held in Culiacan in the state of Sinaloa. Only the three men participate, their respective guards forming a security perimeter around the residence. Following this meeting, Benjamin announces that communication channels are re-established and the situation is under control. He gives clear instructions to his men: avoid any action likely to rekindle tensions with El Chapo's group. Yet, despite these apparent peaceful resolutions, El Chapo quickly resumes his operations in the Tijuana corridor. More provocatively, he intensifies his efforts to corrupt local authorities, which led to several seizures of shipments belonging to the Arellano brothers. In the midst of this ever-intensifying conflict, El Mayo found himself in a delicate position, forced to make a strategic choice between the two rival factions. Vicentillo takes the floor.
In 1991, I was studying in the city of Tijuana. I was in my first year of high school, 15 years old. One day, leaving my house, I was going to pick up my girlfriend, who is now my wife. She lived in Los Angeles. When I left my house, about 6 blocks away, a closed truck, blocked my way. Someone got out, tried to open my door, and shouted at me to get out. I locked the door and accelerated, and when I started driving, I heard a gunshot and saw that the window of my car had cracked, because the car I was in was bulletproof. 2 weeks earlier, my father had sent me that car and warned me not to go out unless I was in it.
El Mayo sensed that danger loomed, especially since several of his associates had recently been eliminated. His son, Vicentillo, claimed to have recognized Ramon's voice on the shooter's radio during the liquidation attempt. Informed of the incident, El Mayo immediately contacted Ramon for explanations. As expected, the latter categorically denies any involvement. Time passes, and the situation becomes critical for El Mayo. Benjamin demands not only his loyalty, but also claims more than $20 million that he considers due. The Arellano brothers have meticulously accounted for his profits and calculated what Mayo would owe them for passage rights. The Arellanos managed the border as if it were their private property. Mayo knew that by refusing to pay, he risked having a price on his head. In early 1992, he decides to move his two families to Culiacan in Sinaloa, where he felt safer. This break with Tijuana led El Mayo to rely more on his other compadre, El Chapo, already accompanied by Hector. El Azul would also become an essential member of the Sinaloa group. A few months later, explosions would occur in front of two residences in Culiacan, one belonging to El Chapo and the other to El Mayo. In El Mayo's case, a car bomb explodes right in front of his son Serafin's birthday party. His mother claims that the attack was orchestrated by the Arellano brothers. During a later court hearing, she would testify that the alleged perpetrator was the same man who had been her son's godfather.
From that day on, our lives were never the same. The same men that not long before stood up for our children in church and promised to raise them to be good Catholics were now trying to eliminate them.
This territorial struggle tarnished the reputation of the Arellano brothers in Tijuana. According to the testimony of Lieutenant El Kitty, a second diplomatic meeting was organized to try to ease the growing tensions. As Benjamin prepares to attend, his brother Ramon informs him that he has received alarming information. El Chapo is planning to eliminate Benjamin during this trip. This revelation is decisive. From then on, Ramon develops an obsession with El Chapo, swearing to eliminate him before he destroys them. The Arellano brothers feel so powerful that they not only begin to increase this so-called commission for anyone using their corridor, but also extend their territory to seize more areas along the Pacific. But while the brothers believe themselves untouchable, another vendetta remains to be settled. September 1992. 9 people were kidnapped from different locations, with the complicity of corrupt members of the judicial police. They all had one thing in common: their family ties or friendship with the imprisoned Miguel Felix Gallardo. Among the victims were 4 members of his family, close friends, and even lawyers working for him. A few hours later, the 9 bodies were found on a highway in southern Mexico. Their hands were tied behind their backs, and signs of torture were evident. The operation is attributed to Hector Palma acting with his friend El Chapo, not only to get revenge, but also to send a clear message to the former boss. His time was over. It's interesting to note that Miguel, who would remain in prison for decades, specified in a letter written in 2009 to a journalist that he had never ordered the elimination of Hector Palma's family. He also denied any family relationship with the Arellano Felix brothers, contrary to information widely disseminated in the press that portrayed him as their uncle. Whatever the truth, the Sinaloa group is only at its beginning, and if the Arellano Felix brothers believe themselves invincible in their Tijuana fortress, they are still unaware that this war, now inevitable, will eventually consume them too.